Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our conversation today. It's titled AI in Practice, Strategy and Execution. My name is Andrew Lee. I'm an assistant professor here at the Tepper School of Business. I'm also one of the founders of Enable, which is a retail and services collaborative jointly run by CMU's School of Computer Science, Tepper School of Business, and College of Fine Arts. If this is your first time at one of our events, Enable is a unique forum aimed at the retail and service industries for meeting the needs of their customers through advances in design and technology. Our explicit mission is to create more humane, efficient, and positive retail and service experiences by creating a community of conversation across industries and CMU departments. There's more info on our site. That's cmu.edu/enable. And finally, big thanks to our current sponsor, the Home Depot. Just a few logistics for today's event. Number one, this event is being recorded and is on the record. We'll eventually post this recording on our website. And number two, as always, we encourage you to ask questions at any time. In fact, there's time reserved for today's event specifically for Q&A. You can ask questions by clicking the Q&A button in Zoom, right? And we see all of those, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our main event today. I'm happy to introduce our guest for today, Bob Monroe. Bob is a teaching professor of business technologies here at the Tepper School of Business. He's also an alum of CMU's School of Computer Science, where he received his master's and PhD. Before joining us and helping us out here as faculty, Bob spent some time in the software industry, building software products and services. And perhaps most importantly for today's discussion, he is kind of our resident expert in both data management and digital product management. Bob, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate the invitation and look forward to chatting with everyone here.
So just for the audience, I have a plan as far as this discussion goes. I want to kind of dive into two separate pieces here while we have Bob. The first is at the level of individual AI projects, why they work, why they fail, so on. And then the second part is at a higher level, corporate strategy, how companies should be thinking at a high level about AI. I have one disclaimer right now. I know specifically there's a lot of hype, a lot of excitement around certain areas of AI, specifically around, let's say, language models, image models, generative AI. I'm going to try, though I might fail, I'm going to try to reserve that topic for the second half of today. If we end up touching on that earlier, that's totally fine. But just, if you're in the audience and you're thinking, why are we not talking about this topic? It's coming, and it's coming very soon. Okay.
Oh, is it coming?
So let me dive into this first subject. I was a little greedy here in thinking of topics. My motivation, my main question, why I wanted to bring you in, is kind of the following observation. If I grab kind of a random Fortune 500 company, outside of a select few, I think many of those companies struggle with executing AI projects. And that's despite the fact that companies, I think, are very good at collecting data. There's lots of tools available. And I think my experience has been they kind of struggle with this. Let me just start baseline. Is that state of the world? Do you agree with that? Is that in line with kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonably good way to lay out the landscape, with that really big exception for the handful of largely big tech companies that are doing amazing things with AI, right? So what we have is less of a everybody is struggling with it situation, and more of a situation where we have a handful of big companies that have massive resources, tremendous businesses, in many cases outside of AI, that can fund all the AI work, that are really running away and doing amazing things with it. They're sort of showing what can be done. So that's kind of a separate class. And I tend not to when I talk to companies, I tend to say, yeah, they're really good at it. You probably don't actually need to be that good at it, right, to be great in your business, right? If you build farm tractors, if you build cars, if you trade commodities, if you do all sorts of different things, you don't necessarily need to be the leading company in AI in the world. On the other hand, and actually, I'm going to step back. You also don't need to be the leading database company. You don't need to be the leading networking company. You don't need to be all sorts of things relating to computing. So if we think of AI as sort of a set of computing capabilities, the same way we think of databases or ERP systems or logistics management systems, or take your pick, um, then your goal is to say, well, where does that fit in with my business? Where is it important for my business? And how do I use those tools to do my business better, as opposed to kind of push the frontier in what you can do with this? And for that class, outside of the giant tech companies, I would say that there are plenty of companies that are struggling with it. My impression is that there are a substantial fraction, and actually I may be very skewed in this, right? Because the kind of companies I talk to are the ones that come and say, "Hey, can you help us learn more about this?" But even when I go out to conferences and I just talk, broadly around various industry groups, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of activity, and there's actually a lot of investment. And so one of the hypotheses might be companies just aren't investing in AI, and if you're not Google or you're not Amazon, et cetera, you're not investing at that scale. But plenty of companies are doing a lot of investment in sort of an exploratory stage and a prototyping stage in trying to get some systems up and running. That's sort of one layer where we're seeing it. And then I think another factor at play is my cynical, only half a joke definition of AI is getting machines to do things that we thought only people could do 5 years ago. Right. And if you do that, there's kind of like this running horizon of what's AI. And we have a long history of saying, oh, it would be AI, right? We would have intelligent machines if we could find a machine that could play chess. We made a machine that could play chess. If we had a machine that could beat a grandmaster, right? We did that. And it turns out, well, chess is pretty much a search problem, right? If we had a way where you could just kind of put some words out, and whatever was out on the internet would be brought to you if it was related to that. We're like, well, that's a great AI problem. Well, it turns out no, it's just a search problem, right? You make a big index, you look it up. So we have this long history of taking things that were really hard AI problems, figuring them out, and saying, not quite AI. Okay, so it's always kind of on the frontier. And if you use that standard, there's all sorts of successful examples where companies are using simple predictive analytics in lots of different places, predictive prescriptive analytics that we probably would have called AI 10 years ago. And now we're like, well, that's not chat GPT, right? And it's not. So part of it is that there's this moving target, right? And you've got these really big, really good companies that are pushing what that target is. And the other is that you know so that's that, I would say, is the baseline. But then within those companies, there's a huge range of success with these projects. I would say that a lot of them are struggling with figuring out how to do it at scale and with the kind of returns they want. Right. So a lot of companies, if you're a Fortune 500 company, you can afford to hire some machine learning specialists, build some models, right? Find some data in the company, make some interesting predictions. The trick is, how do we take that and scale that to our $12 billion a year company? Right. So we're actually getting real business value out of it, instead of saying, right, look, we've shown how we can fit this in. Okay, I talked for a really long time about that. So yes, I think the general idea is your assessment of the landscape is right. Yes, there's a really broad range, and there's a bit of a sort of an attribution and categorization problem of what is an AI project. That actually makes a lot of companies feel like they're not doing very well with it, even though if they give themselves some credit, they're probably doing better than they might have thought.
So let me try to grab some main ideas here, partly because this will frame, I think, the rest of this discussion.
Mhm.
So the very beginning, and this I agree we should kind of live with that. We're imagining again. This is a Fortune 490 minus
I
the
like
top
that
10,
one.
right? We're
Fortunate.
talking, and this I agree with. We're not inventing new AI. right? So we're talking about projects, no innovation in the sense that this should be kind of published, like machine learning researchers should be looking at all of this and thinking this we're okay with not innovating in that sense. So this should be the application of kind of existing AI. A second point you mentioned is that very often it's not, as far as diagnosing failure, it's not a lack of investment. So there seem to be at least dollars flowing in the right direction, right? And the third point that that you made that I liked was that, and this will really kind of get to helping us diagnose what's going wrong, I think, right? This third point was that it's kind of, he didn't phrase it this way, but I think maybe it's in some ways it's easy to do proof of concept.
Yeah, it's
I
easy.
like this because you and I mean, we actually, I think between the courses that you and I teach, we have students that are leaving with the capabilities of managing data,
Sure.
of cleaning data, of
Building
taking
simple
that to kind
models,
of
run through.
predictive
Yep.
models, prescriptive models, right? But you kind of, again, if the game is to diagnose what's going wrong for a company that is simply trying to apply existing AI to something that use the word scales to something meaningful for them, that yeah, there's that, like there's a bump after that. There's a hurdle after that. Even if, right, some employee has kind of worked out some sort of proof of concept, it's the scaling of that up to like the organizational level where issues arise. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think the scale is part of it, right? But the other is sort of rethinking your business to figure out where it makes sense to put this in. Okay, so it's often not just can we do this bigger, right? When you build a model, yeah, you can usually, you put it on bigger machines, put it on a cluster of machines, right? Feed it more data. You can scale in that sense, but in figuring out, actually we're going to have to adjust to really get value from this. We're going to have to adjust how we do business. Okay, and that might be let me put it this way: it does not need to be something like I love Ant Financial as an example, right? Often in China, where they use roughly 1% of the number of employees of Bank of America to manage a similar number of assets, right? They just completely changed the operating model of a bank of everything is just done with predictive models, right? We take people out of it completely. We keep the risks down by keeping the individual transactions and loans and other things down to a small level, and we can scale it. That's sort of an extreme way to rethink banking. That's not what I think most of these companies, in as you said, the Fortune 490, are need to do. They need to say, you know what? Do we really need a human to review all of these insurance claims? And I work a lot with insurance companies, right? So, and the answer is they already know they don't need a human to review a lot of insurance claims, right? They have automated processing for 65% of them that come through, right? They can come up with simple basic rules that say pay it or send it to a person for review, right? And they do. And a lot of the trick with, in these case, for example, figuring out how to use AI effectively is not can we turn it into a 100% decision with AI. That seems to be too big a jump, right? For regulatory
Mhm.
reasons, for risk reasons, for a variety of other things. But if you could move it from 65% are automatically adjudicated to 85% or to 90%, and you have the people that are actually reviewing it, who in some cases are not terribly expensive, your basic medical coder, and others are a medical director at a physician who's reviewing these, whose time is very expensive. And if you can have them review the really hard ones and the really valuable ones, and going from 65% to 90% is a huge number is a huge amount of human work that's not happening anymore, right? So you can pull that out. So in a lot of companies, thinking they tend to have, what I found is the companies tend to be pretty good once you've laid out sort of what prediction based AI can do. They're pretty good at saying, oh, we could do it here, we could do it there. But then they've got 600 people working in that area. They've got a 30-year history of we do it this way, right? The data lives in 6 different silos, 2 of which have regulatory restrictions on it. And it becomes a really complex thing, right? It's not a lack of will. It's not a lack of interest. It's not a lack of smarts. It just becomes this complex IT problem. Um, and moving from it works in the lab to it works at scale. We've changed how these 600 people are working. We've adjusted and cleared with the regulators how you're going to do this. We've gotten, data merged from these 3 different sources that were never intended to talk to each other, and we can do it all in real time when something comes in. You know, out of all that stuff I described, very little of it is AI, right? It's all technology management for a business. And so when you throw in the complexity of it's a new technology, there's people that are not that familiar with it that have to work with it. There's questions about trust. There's questions about proving it out. Right? That adds a lot of inertia that needs to be overcome.
I
And
mean,
also gives me a lot of sympathy for the people at the companies. No, seriously, right? It's not like I talk with them, and it's not like they haven't heard of AI or they haven't thought of doing this. It's when you actually lay out the logistics, suddenly it becomes quite an expensive and daunting proposition.
so I like this though because I mean, in some ways, I could you tell me if I'm wrong, but we have tools around what is essentially project management, and I like what you said. I mean, essentially, if you rule out, if you take out the AI and the right, I mean, literally, if you just take out the phrase AI, it just sounds like project management. I mean, there are different
Yep.
steps to this, and you have to define kind of the right
Yes.
metrics of success. Yeah, and you have to adjust at the right times. And so, what is? I mean, but if it were that, then I think the Fortune 490 would be nailing this because I think they're kind of nailing project management in general. I think, right?
Big
To a
AI
certain
projects
extent,
are hard. Big AI projects that require rethinking how you do your business are harder,
I
right?
see.
And so yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. And you do need to have people that are good at building the models, and you do need to have people ways to prove them out. You do need to get people to trust them. All of those are sort of individually solvable problems.
Mhm.
But they add complexity. And the other thing is that when I go and talk with these companies, again, I have a biased sample that I'm working with. Right, I'm working with companies that are typically undertaking it, are interested in doing it better, are underway with this. There's a lot of small things that they're doing. Right, they're going out and they're experimenting with how it goes in various places. Um, you know, yeah, so and there's actually quite a few successes, right? And a lot of them are just not, they don't look like Chat GPT, right? They look like seriously, they look like this insurance company I'm thinking of. They look like going from 75 or 80%. They actually had 75 or 80% that were automatically adjudicated through what they call robotic process automation or RPA systems, which is just a rules based system, up to about 90, right? And that's this is a big chunk of the business's basic operations. So that jump is actually really important. They'd like to keep going, and they'd like to have those predictions be better. And of the ones that get paid, that actually were fraudulent or problematic, they'd like to get better at flagging those because the RPA rules tend to just say it's not worth, right. That's a low enough value thing that it's not worth digging into it. So there's all these other ways they'd like to improve it, but they're very much in this case using it for those purposes, which is core to their business, by the way.
Think this is a good moment to we've kind of naturally, and it makes sense. We are pivoting towards kind of the second topic of more broadly. Okay, given a capability to execute specific AI projects, how do we then think strategically about which ones to execute? Right. That could just be the question, but I want to dive in right now to what I know is on everybody's mind. And again, we've received this question in many different forms. Let me ask: how should companies be thinking about at the corporate level, corporate strategy level, right? AI. And I'll let you to the audience. I actually restricted Bob to. I told Bob to not necessarily speak about this yet, but now I'm going to let you loose. Specifically, right? What's on all of our minds, right? Which is kind of the you can call it hype. I think it's not hype at all. It's the success, right? Right? Like the developments that we see all the time. How should companies think about general strategy around AI, especially given, I mean, the rapid rate of development in this space?
In a lot of ways, it's very, very similar to the way they should be thinking about other technological advances. right? So if you think of it as we're going to invest a certain amount in new technologies and figuring out how to use new technologies in our business, you're going to have a fairly substantial chunk of that investment is going to go just towards sort of keeping the trains running, so to speak. Not only if you're in real terms, if you're a railroad, metaphorically if you're not a railroad. So keep the operations running, and you're going to have a substantial chunk of your portfolio dedicated to that. You may find places that AI will help out with that a little bit, but it's mostly just this is what we do. This is what I business. You then probably have a smaller portion that is devoted to figuring out whether and how to use more advanced, faster moving, bigger jump technologies. Okay?
Mhm.
I would say that most companies that are wrestling with most with most AI projects right now tend to be machine learning projects, and they tend to be and I certainly encourage them, but I see this. They tend to be looking at stuff that was state of the art 10 years ago. Okay, and that's a good thing. I don't say that as a bad thing. Things the giant tech companies were really wrestling and trying to figure out 10, 15 years ago has now kind of filtered down to the point where it's proven, it's built, it's a tool that people can use instead of a science project. Okay, the bulk, so an awful lot of the AI and machine learning, and it's almost all machine learning, by the way, within that. But the bulk of the ML stuff within there, that's where you want to be thinking, okay, how could we use this either to dramatically change our, the way that our business operates to become much more efficient? How could we use this to provide better service to our customers, to produce better products? You're really kind of rethinking things instead of just sort of small incremental work to keep your operations going. You should kind of think of the tool there as something like a database, right? And actually let's think of it as a database. So we're not talking about relational databases. Those have been around for 30, 40 years. That's this part over here. Everybody knows how to use them, but you probably have been looking at ways to manage and work with loosely structured data, text data, images, video, etc. That's not as sexy and exciting as AI, but for a lot of businesses, they can really transform what they do and how they do it by learning to use those tools. Okay. And again, 15 years ago, they were science projects. Now you can download them and you can install them and they're robust and there's companies that will support them. But you kind of need to think about using them a little bit differently in how you deal with data. Okay. So maybe this is like 70%, 25%. Okay. And then there's working with the generative ML and the really exciting and sexy stuff that is moving at 9 million miles an hour, give or take 8.9 million. And it's moving super fast. It is still a science project, but it's a science project that's kind of been unleashed on the world. It's really cool. It's amazing what it does. And the interest most one of the interesting questions I would have for somebody who's considering using that in their business is, what does it do? Right? And in particular, what does it do? What's the other than, I mean, there's a bunch of party tricks that are really neat, right? You can sit and you can have Chat GPT talk back to you, and it basically passes the Turing test at this point, right? You can generate, astronauts riding unicorns in space with glitter in the style of Pablo Picasso, and it pops out. It's really cool, right? If you're a retailer and you're trying to think, how do I stock the right things in my stores and encourage people to buy those things and price them properly, it's not obvious, right? What the jump is there. On the other hand, um, if you go back to the basic, those things that I'm now saying are no longer science projects. The one that's here in the middle that I'm saying, these are the proven technology that's sort of a new way of thinking and using things. If you go back 15 years ago, or not even 15, 10 years ago, that same technology was all about, is this a dog or a cat in an image? Right? And you're like, well, that's cool, but I don't really know that I need to have something that can detect dogs and cats in images. What I need is something that can help me figure out what the right price is for this and how much people are actually going to pay under different circumstances. Well, it turns out it's a predictive model. You build a neural net, you take a bunch of inputs, it makes predictions, and you can adjust that to make different kinds of predictions. And it took a while to figure out that predictive power is and kind of classification is really what was going on and could be generalized to all sorts of different things. I don't think we figured that out at all in generative AI. right? And I think that's sort of the $1 trillion question that all these companies are wrestling with right now. So if I'm a retailer, right, which I'm assuming most of the folks on this call are, I'm probably not going to build new generative models right now. 10 years from now, I might, right? That might just be a thing. So I almost certainly want to have some slice of what we're doing, figuring out what's going on, how to engage with it, where are the opportunities, what's interesting here. But I probably don't want to be best investing a ton of money in it at the moment until we kind of figure out how does this help. Now, that says if you invest a little bit of your, of your dollars, and you come up with a fantastic idea how to do it, yeah, take it and run with it, right? But recognize that it's a really, really fast moving thing. It's a game where the field keeps playing, changing, the rules keep changing, and nobody actually knows quite what the goal is at the end, right? It's a little chaotic, and so playing in that part of the technology world in general should rarely be the focus of an established non-tech company. Okay. On the other hand, you should keep your eyes and ears open, try to understand what's going on there. But generally, you wait a few years, right? And we're long past the relational databases of the world is to keep the business running at this point. The NoSQL databases are, hey, we can deal with text, we can deal with images, we can do all sorts of neat things with different kinds of data, and the tools are available, so we should be using it now. I'm not actually sure what the next step in that analogy is. But ML tools, prediction and classification are right in that smack in the middle there. I would say that is where the bulk of your strategic effort should be going, is identifying prediction problems in your business, identifying workflows. My favorite analogy with most DML things is think of it as an infinite army of interns. Right. So the idea is if you have a problem that you could sit down with an intern fresh to the company and explain in the afternoon what they need to do, right? And at that point you could let them go, right? Maybe you would supervise, maybe every now and then you look at the work and say, got it right, got it wrong, got it right, got it wrong, a few cycles of that. But the idea is instead of having Stanley and VJ, your interns here for the summer, right? You had a bazillion of them and you could copy them and have them run away. That's the way that a lot of the ML models work well now. And there's a lot of problems that works well for, right? But that's kind of the problem you're looking for. You're not looking for, whereas something like these newer generative AIs are, they have the sense of being more, I think they present as being more intelligent than they are, but they certainly seem to have a broader range and repertoire of capabilities. Like I said, Andrew, I'll talk forever.
No, but I like this answer because I mean, like, if anything stands out, the strategy that came out isn't really that different than the strategy that we recommend in personal finance, right? Which is that like
Okay.
yeah, I mean, if you're
All right.
invest in risky assets, but kind of keep that a small portion of your portfolio.
And
Um,
think of it as an option. I mean, think so if you
Precisely.
think of the keeping the operations running, that's just investing and keeping your operations running. This part in the middle is sort of continuous improvement and ways to incrementally improve what you're doing. Maybe sort of a step jump, but maybe it's a substantial improvement, maybe it's very incremental, but you're probably not completely transforming your business. Over here, this is an option for doing something very different. And portfolio should balance accordingly.
So continuing on again, like broader strategy, right? At the company level, I'm willing to, let's say, rule out kind of developments that have happened, let's say, in the last 12 months. So we're just talking kind of at any given moment. If it's text, it's translation or transcription, right? If it's image, it's not generating really cool stuff, but identifying cats versus dogs, right? You and I have both worked with companies that are certainly committed to what I'll call like an AI culture.
Yep.
That is, I don't know if they'll succeed at this, but the strategy, their AI strategy is that they would like to enable, in the regular sense, enable, right, all employees to kind of think about new ideas, new applications, new projects around existing AI.
Yep.
Right. The way I describe it, I mean, that sounds awesome. I hope nobody in the audience thinks that's bad. But I mean, I think we've seen kind of different attempts at this play out. Does that work? Does that make sense? Have you seen it work?
Well,
What's the, because I think we both know examples where that's been tried. That's one strategy. What do you think about that?
so I think it's hard for a company that, if you sell something that's not traditionally a tech product, right? And suddenly you need to have a much more tech forward, tech thinking uh, your business strategy is to be more tech thinking, tech forward, AI embedding everything we do. If you've been around as a company for decades or a century, and you kind of do something else, it's a hard cultural shift to make. And it doesn't really matter if it's AI or computing or customer centric versus operation efficiency centric, right? It's companies build cultures and things that they're focused on. So at that level, there's sort of a big cultural change. That's kind of outside my scope of expertise, I would say. But other than recognizing it's hard, it's hard to do. Now, if you are trying to let's so what I would suggest for most companies is roll it back, roll your ambitions back from we're going to create a culture of AI, right? That works if you're Microsoft, maybe. Okay, and Microsoft's actually an interesting case study where in the 90s, the mid 90s, they said the internet's everything, and they actually changed the company to do the internet, and they kind of did it again with cloud. Okay, and whether they can do it again with AI remains to be seen. But there are very, very few big companies like that that can make that kind of cultural shift. Most of them fail. So roll your ambitions back a little bit and say, rather than becoming an AI company, if we are a logistics company that moves grains and other food type of products around the country and gets them from farmers to mills to retailers. Don't think we need to become an AI company. Think here's some amazing tools, right? Where might we be able to apply them? What kinds of problems should we think about solving with them? Right. And where can we go and sort of find some wins to try these experiments? You typically do want to start with experiments, right? Find some things where there's an obvious prediction problem. I love the intern analogy because most people can grasp that, right? Most managers that have no AI background at all, or even little technology background, I say, if I gave you a smart intern, or even a moderately smart intern, straight from college, they can either say, "Yeah, I could describe what you need to do clearly enough that I think they could do it," or "Ooh, wow, that's no, that's like something that we would take an MBA graduate and put them in a in a training program for 3 months before we let them do. That's not a good candidate for an AI project." So find the places where you can break your problem down as a prediction problem, where you can separate out sort of the prediction, the decision, the action from sort of how it's done currently, if that makes sense, right? You can break the process down and say, oh, well, here's the decision we need to make. Here's the data we need to make it. This is the prediction we're doing in that process. That's a good candidate for turning into a black box that's an AI model, machine learning model. Okay, drop it in and start figuring out how you can then reapply the people's time and energy to something that people are good at and machines are bad at. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I would encourage incremental. I would encourage looking for wins. I would discourage broad and radical transformation of the company to be an AI company, just because broad and radical transformation of a culture does not work very often in companies. But certainly new technologies, new ideas are introduced all the time in companies, and use the same techniques that you use for that.
So it strikes me actually, and I'm kind of thinking, those in the audience, I think maybe would actually the following question will resonate almost on the other side, right? Which is, I'm an employee at a company. I'm not necessarily even in a technical role, but I do think I have like a really nice idea.
Yeah.
It kind of satisfies all of the criteria that we've set up so far. It's not, it's not going to hype AI, right? This is just like I think I have kind of a nice application of established AI. Um, how do I make the case for that? Because for me, I mean, Professor Andrew Lee, the way I do it is I get to download data sets and just kind of run things, and this is what I do, right? Like I can kind of very quickly try out different algorithms And basically, I think I can develop a proof of concept pretty quickly. This is where like
You can you
at
can
the
build
organizational level is pretty challenging, right? So how does like a non technical employee
listen, so
sell
Ed,
an idea?
you're pretty good at developing the model really quickly. I don't know that you're particularly good at going into the company, figuring out exactly how everything works, figuring out
Yeah.
exactly
Oh
what
no.
needs to change, figure
I,
out
yeah.
who needs to change what they do and how they do. And this is not because you're this is not an insult to you at all. This is that's just hard, right?
Yeah.
It's hard, and it requires a very different set of skills, I think,
Yeah.
than what you're talking about. So I tend to encourage. Most of the great ideas for where you're going to do AI are going to come from people just like that, where you can apply it and get sort of these small incremental wins, right? I'm well, sometimes a transformational project is great, right? They're big, they're risky, they're difficult. Sometimes they work and they're spectacular. They pay off spectacularly. With most companies of the type that we're talking about here, sort of non-native tech companies, um, an incremental model works a lot better, right? Finding places where you can get where the technology solves a real problem and it can be used repeatedly at scale. Right? And this doesn't have to be massive scale, but it's rarely worth it to build a model for a decision you need to make once a month. Right? I mean, it might be the model might be helpful for a person, right? It might give you some guidance on, based on previous thing, this is what we expect, but it's probably not worth investing a ton to train a model and have that be an automated decision. On the other hand, a decision that happens every second would be a great candidate for building a model. So the example I use for this is I like for this is if you go to Amazon.com, since we're talking retailers or many other places, and somebody puts something in their cart, and here's a set of recommendations of other things you might like. Right? There is no role for a person in that. It happens, many times per second, and it has to be automated. Okay, so that's what I mean by scale, right? It's going to be the same decision again and again and again and again and again. Now, who understands the business well enough to figure out where those decisions are being made, right? And where the right data, where it's a data-driven decision. And one of the tricks is, in many cases, if there's just a person that looks at things that are coming through, it's a data-driven decision, but they don't even think of it as a data-driven decision, right? They kind of they look at the situation, they say, this is the situation, here's the obvious right answer. You can probably break that down to say, well, how do you actually come to that decision, right? What inputs are you using to consider? What factors are you using in the world around you to make that decision, right? And that's where now doing that is not typically something that's sort of what an AI person does, right? A machine learning model person does. It's not necessarily something that a person who's kind of handling customer service complaints is going to be doing. Yeah, on the other hand, the person handling customer service complaints has a real good idea of the kind of things people call in about, how you resolve them, what you need to do, what data you need to look up to do that. So typically you want to put those two people together, right? You want, from the cultural side, you want to encourage people to find situations where there's a lot of repetitive, boring stuff they have to do that, that there's not an obvious way to make a simple rule for. Right? And we talked about how companies are good at this. I mentioned RPA, robotic process automation, workflows, et cetera, things like that. Companies are really good at that, right? Things that were really simple to automate with a set of simple rules have by and large been automated in big efficient companies, right? The trick is there's a whole lot of stuff that's not very amenable to a simple set of strict rules, right? There's also a lot of stuff that really requires sort of deep analysis, ad hoc thought, because it's different from time to time. There's this gap in the middle. I try to make it not, there's this gap in the middle, though, of things that are not particularly ad hoc. They're sort of structured, repeatable decisions, right? There's well understood criteria, but you kind of need to look at it as a person and say, well, you got to figure out this, and you got to figure out that, and you got to figure out this. That stuff over here in this in between is the stuff that's a really good candidate for trying to build an ML model around that could make the automated prediction, and that you can put into your RPA system, you can put into your workflow, you can put into other parts where the decision is now much more subtle, and the types of inputs you can be thinking about and working with can be potentially a lot more complex than they would with a basic rule-based system. Does that answer the question? I think I veered off in about 5 tangents, but I thought I kind of pulled it in and landed that somehow.
No, I like this very much, but this raises the following question, I think, right? Which like I want to keep building on your example, right? Let's say I'm at a company which has its kind of like customer service reps, and one of them actually does have a nice idea,
Yeah.
in the sense that if kind of pursued properly, would apply some sort of ML AI to
Yep.
make some sort of process efficient. Now, to be clear, and this is not anybody's fault, but there are other 9 other ideas that are not so good.
Yeah.
And this is the nature of it, right?
It turns out there are bad ideas.
There, and that's nobody's fault.
There may or
Uh,
may not be stupid questions, but there are definitely stupid ideas.
and I think
Hard to
we agree.
tell which one's which
Yeah,
sometimes.
I
And
think
seriously,
we.
this is the art of management. It's hard to tell which one's which.
This is so precisely is the I think, yeah, this happens even with or without AI, but I think the my question, I mean, this is like, I mean, really, I mean, legit, truly, I have this question, right? Which is okay. I think that my when they're AI ideas, I think they take a bit longer to explore, and this is the problem, right?
Yeah.
The idea is, if I'm sitting in the ML AI team of that company, and I'm
Yep.
seeing kind of a queue of such ideas, there are definitely gold nuggets in there, and then of course there are not so good ones, and that's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. But how do I deal with this throughput? I mean, these ideas take a long time to
Well,
kind of analyze.
I think that it's sort of like in a lot of ways it's like any other tech project proposal. So any well-run any company with a well-run tech organization and a reasonably creative, ambitious workforce, which would just assume most of our companies in our that we're discussing have, right? They have to have some prioritization system, because there's going to be a lot more ideas for how to spend money, time, people, other resources, whatever resources you have, on using a technology to do X than you have time, people, money, resources, right? Just it's easy to generate ideas. It's hard to implement them and turn them into something. So you need to have some review and filtering and prioritization system. So I would assume that most companies have that. Now, with most technologies, like let's take this technology and let's do this with it. There's typically well, there are potentially more than that, but there's two basic parts to the case you want to make. One of those is just a business case, right? These are the benefits that we think that we will receive if we go and we implement this project. Here's our assessment of what it's going to cost, right? Upfront investment and then ongoing costs, right? So you build a basic cost benefit analysis model on that, right? You have some hurdle rate, you have some risk adjusted hurdle rate. We know how to do these things. This is not complex. The other thing that you need to do is you need to prove out that it could work. Now, if what you're doing is you're trying a new module of a database, you've got the database built in, it's well proven, the module has been around for 20 years, right? It's debugged well, right? It's probably a pretty straightforward technical test. You need to have a couple people try and hook it up, run some things through and see, does it actually do what we need it to do? If, on the other hand, what you're trying to do is make predictions, build a black box machine learning model, that technical proving, that technical feasibility test, to your point, becomes a lot harder. Okay. And so that's where you need somebody like you, where you're saying we can test this out pretty quickly, right? You do need somebody who knows how to do that, who knows how to build the model so you can get the data and they can run the test. And often what you find isn't, oh yeah, it turns out that Oracle built this module pretty well. It works nicely with their database. It does what it says it does, right? That's kind of the expected technical outcome, technical analysis assessment outcome for that kind of project. For this kind of project, turns out we were trying to predict X based on A, B, and C, and
Mhm.
A, B, and C just don't predict X very well. Right? So you could have a great CBA for a great business case, but your technical feasibility is not there. So you need to do both, and this is where you need both kinds of experts. Now, one of the tricks with that is step is much bigger than just AI, right? You want to be enabling people around your company who have good ideas for how to use technology, And I think of a machine learning model as sort of a black box technology you're going to drop in somewhere and adjust how you do business around it. You want to encourage them to surface those ideas and figure out how you can match them up with somebody who can try to test it out on the technical side. So, really long answer. My take on the simple version of this is I really don't think it's all that different from the way companies should be handling other technology investment decisions. Okay, and by this I don't mean, um, and by technology investment, I mean for risky new projects or
Mhm.
projects with a reasonable amount of risk to do something differently. There's a different category of technology investment for, should we upgrade from version 17.3.1 of this mail server to 17.3.2? That's kind of a different sort of analysis. I'm thinking more things like, let's use this, let's try to do something different with it. We haven't built it before. There's a non-trivial risk in that the whole idea is going to fail, right? That's where you typically want to have a product council, an IT council, something like that makes those prioritization decisions. It's just that it's more likely to fail as you're starting out with this than a lot of the other ones are on a technical side.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. I was hoping, and this has worked out almost like in a scripted fashion. I was hoping that we would spend some time talking about education. And is it on cue? We have a question kind of along these lines. I'm actually just going to read out that question. And to be fair, I think maybe both of us should owe answers to
Okay.
this, right? Let me read the question first. I think you can read it too. But the question is,
Okay.
many universities are doing work in AI and machine learning. What is Tepper doing that is particularly different, unique among business schools? And
Hmm.
before I let you speak, let me say, I mean, you're. I think
Take it, Andrew.
the two of us combined are involved in every single undergraduate, master's, exec ed, and every single. So I'm gonna let you go first and kind of well, the one that you do that I don't is product management. So maybe you could touch on that. But I think I have my own ideas.
Take it and run, Andrew. I've talked way too much. It's all. Let's hear what you have to say.
So I'll grab the like. I actually would be curious to hear where it stands in product management, but I can certainly speak specifically on kind of our vanilla, like our standard undergraduate, our undergraduate business students and our MBAs. And I want to be clear, I'm specifically not talking about the ones that opt into concentrations that have to do with analytics or concentrations that have to do with machine learning or concentrate. I would like to specifically talk about what we do. Sounds bad what we do to students, but what we do to students that are trying to avoid any kind of technical know-how. And I want to be clear, I mean, the word unique is real time. I can't promise you that not a single other school is doing this, but I promise you, I mean, we are drilling analytical knowledge into our students. I'll say what if you want kind of a like a superlative. I'll give you an example. There's one area in analytics. There's one area in kind of the AI of decision making, if you want, right? Usually we call this prescriptive analytics. This is on the record, and I'll say it. We're number one. We are absolutely number one, and we teach absolutely the most in among all programs, at least top 50 undergraduate business programs, top 50 MBA programs. Our students leave with more knowledge on this than anyone else, and this is in our core curriculum. I mean, I'm picking on this as an example, but you want unique, you want kind of different, you want kind of what we're doing training. We're putting our students through some tough stuff. I'm a little nervous that this anonymous writer is a student, but if that's the case, I'm sorry, right? Uh, but that's kind of like an extreme way of saying, at the very least, I mean, I think a theme that we hit on again and again today, right, is, I mean, I think Bob and I both believe in kind of AI, machine learning, and the value of all of that. I think we both clearly believe in kind of establishing a culture around that. And then I'll say, I won't speak for Bob, but I'll say I think that's easier when kind of everybody has a certain set of knowledge, and you can be sure that this is something that kind of giving everybody that training, giving everybody that knowledge is something that we think about. We at Tepper at least think about in terms of training all of our students.
Yeah,
That's my answer.
I'd second that. I think Andrew, you hit it on the head. I make no claims of uniqueness, right? There are hundreds of other
Yeah.
universities out there, and I don't know what all of them are doing. I, I make no claims of unique. I will say that analytics. If you think of machine learning and AI as I would say I think of AI and machine learning as adjacent to and overlapping with what we would call business analytics. Right. So at one level you have really basic analytics and just run the numbers. That's probably not AI. And at other ends, when you build a neural network to try to make predictions uh, about the things that you're doing, you're definitely getting into machine learning. So the analytics infuses sort of what we do in our MBA program. It infuses what we do in our undergrad program. I'll leave PhD out of it because there's all sorts of people. People are doing all sorts of interesting things related to that, but it's a very thin slice of our student population. So yeah, I mean, I guess my I was thinking of I don't actually remember what the joke is, but it was a fish was asked how the water was, and he said, what the hell's water, right? Because it's just kind of around us with everything we do, right? I mean, it's just part of it's just part of the culture here. We analyze the hell out of stuff. We put numbers to things that don't usually have numbers, and we run analyses on them and come up with more numbers. So yeah, which is good and bad, right? that's a strength, right? We're really good at running the numbers. We teach our students how to run the numbers. Obviously there's more to life than running the numbers. So I'll hold off on that. I don't know if that was satisfying. In product management, actually, interestingly, we don't do product management and AI, right? We just treat that as a technology that product managers need to know about. And not just any technology at this point, right? I mean, it's clearly sort of the hot one of two or three hot, rapidly expanding technologies that are creating a lot of opportunities. I will say the machine learning and the AI electives are by far the two most popular electives. They're in the School of Computer Science, and they are by far the most popular electives of our MSPM students. So they see that as well. They agree with us that they should be learning and thinking about how to use these and how to put it into products and services to make great experiences for customers and build products and services around it.
Perfect. So I see we're nearing the end here, and I want to make sure I get everybody out at the promised time. So let me just take a moment to officially close us out. Um, I'm gonna call attention as we wrap up to we have a sure the closing slide that make sure it gets here. Yeah, in closing out, call attention. Normally, I call attention to kind of events that are coming. I'm really excited to call attention to something we have going on, a new program at Enable for this summer, our Retail and Service Innovation Program. We have the folks. We have multiple teams of undergraduate students that are ready to work this summer on research projects in the retail and service tech space. And we're looking for industry partners to engage in different ways. I'm kind of referring to the bullets on the left there. There's kind of many different levels. And to be clear, this can be done even without being an official Enable sponsor. Right. So if you're looking at this and this is something that you think might be of interest to you, my Enable co-lead, Raylan, is heading up this program. Her email is at the bottom left of that slide there. Um, as always, we love to hear from you about what areas you're focusing on, what questions you're concerned about. You can always write to us at enable@cmu.edu. And finally, I encourage you to join Enable as a sponsor, which is the deepest way to participate in our community of technology and design innovators. If you want more info, please reach out to Chris Kissel at enable@cmu.edu. That wraps us up. Thank you to everybody for coming. Thanks, big thanks again to today's guest, Bob Monroe. And finally, thank
Thank
you
you
to
so
everybody
much for
that
having
helped.
me.
Thanks to everybody that helped put on this event. Laura Alford, Chris Kissel, Jen Cadman, Aaron Martin, and our sponsor at Enable, the Home Depot. Um, That wraps us up. Wraps us up. All the best. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.